don't see it yet. There we go. So, the topic of this second session is the adult faith formation, connecting and responding to those we serve. So, are you ready to take over? Oh, actually, we're going to say a prayer first, which there's the picture of Pete and Marylin. Prayer for a generous heart. Jesus, when I hear the gospel about giving to all who ask, I feel overwhelmed. Is that really what you meant? It is hard for me to be generous when I fear that I won't have enough for my own needs. You urge me to trust and to turn all of those needs over to you. Grant me a generous heart. Remind me to give thanks each day for the gifts I am given, that it won't be so hard to give out of the abundance that is mine. In your sacred name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Now, Pete, I will turn it over to you. Pete?
Okay, folks, it's good to be with you today. You can see, if you could keep advancing those slides, you'll see the slide that talks about what you will gain in this session.
It's there.
I see it, and the first thing I want to mention is that prayer which calls for generosity on our part as catechetical leaders is extremely apropos, because adult faith formation leaders put a lot of time and effort into what they do, and sometimes the results or the response is limited. So it's a challenge to continue to be generous with making our attempts to help God's people in their ongoing adult faith formation. In this session, you will, in part one, examine various segments of your parish population. In part two, we will consider ways of asking individuals how they wish to receive adult faith formation. And in part three, we will consider some simple survey techniques. Now, I want to make a comment on our next slide here. It's not really a fact. I guess it's just a presupposition that parish adult faith formation can produce more participation if it corresponds directly to the expressed interests and needs of various adults in our parishes. And I think what we need to remember is that the adults in our parishes are not a homogeneous group. And there's a tendency to just say, well, we've got adults, how do we serve them, and then just treat them as though they're all the same. You might want to consider drawing a circle on a piece of paper that's in front of you right now and looking at that circle as a representation of all the adults in your parish. If you have 200 adults, if you have 1,000, if you have 2,000, if you have 5,000, that circle could represent all the adults in your parish. However, they're not the same. The only thing they have in common is that they're no longer minors. They're adults. But, you know, you could start drawing circles inside of that large circle. For instance, the circle that represents parents, the small circle that represents young adults. What about a circle for empty nesters? And then what really gets complicated, it really doesn't matter who we're talking about. People do not have the same availability to participate in what you offer in ongoing adult faith formation. So how can we find out what various adults are seeking for their ongoing adult faith formation? And I'd like to ask Marylin a question so that she could respond, because she deals with a wide variety of people who are seeking ongoing coursework as adults. So Marylin, how do you ask? And especially, how do you listen with a sensitivity that really allows you to hear the variance that is present among the adults that you work with?
Hi, Pete, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you again this session. I want to answer, my first reaction to this question is that adults are different, as Pete mentions, and they do belong to different groups, but their learning abilities are going to be different, and their listening is going to be a little different. We vary because no one is the same in shape or form. The one thing I think that we need to understand and to really find out what they're seeking for their ongoing adult formation, is to ask these adults who, again, and I'm going to address this later on in the different groups of adults that we minister to. But for now, we have to find out where they are, what they expect, or what is it they desire. But I think even before we do that, we have to go in with the notion, again, that everyone learns differently, they're different, they are at different places in their journeys of faith and whatever that might mean, or their education. They're as different as the day is long. But we also have to understand that even though they're different, they still have to be connected. And that with all of these different groups and all the different ways they learn, what we need to have and to offer them each, or else it wouldn't be faith formation, is this whole notion of spirituality. And we, as the ministers and the professionals in this ministry of catechesis, how do you help them? How do you help these groups, no matter what they're doing, to be closer to God? What are we doing to do this? And not only that, but how do we encourage that special relationship? No matter what they're doing in terms of who they are and where they are in their state of life, I think at the end of the day, this is the common question that all have, no matter what age they are or where they are in terms of their faith or spiritual journey. So they're all different, but it is a parish or a school or whatever we're coming from in terms of our community. How can we stay connected to one another? And that is really important. And what is it that connects us? In other words, we shouldn't be different entities in the parish or school or wherever we are that we just lose sight of everybody else, because that can lead to problems, as you may have already experienced. You know, one group thinks they're better than the other, and it may not even be they're aware of that. Or they feel they need something and the others don't, and they don't understand or respect the other groups. And again, it may not be conscious, but you know, it's just the nature of the human being. So we need to understand where, how we approach these groups gently and listen and make sure that doesn't happen, that division doesn't happen, and at the same time honor what they do. And again, always keep in mind, how am I going to help these people understand and experience God in their lives? That's the bottom line, and that's where we have to be creative. Pete?
Okay, moving ahead to part one, then we're going to examine various segments of your parish population. An approach that I would suggest you give some serious consideration to is to remember groups which already exist in your parish. You're not trying to bring them together through an adult faith formation program. They already meet, and they do that according to their schedule because they have a reason for being in their groups. And so you're not calling them out to go to an extra meeting, but could you get permission by, first of all, talking to the leader or the leaders of a particular group to come to the group meeting at a time they're normally going to meet, to do a short survey of what they might want for their own adult faith formation. It would be a short survey because you're not going to take up a lot of their time because they have a meeting that they want to run. And so you're going to ask for a few minutes of their time. And what you're trying to do is to see, is there some type of adult faith formation that you could bring to an already existing meeting of that group that would be a part of what they do? So you're not taking over this meeting when you're doing this short survey, probably 10, 20 minutes at the most. You could have a conversation with them. You can ask them to fill out the short survey. So the question would be here, what are some of your groups that already exist in your parish? And in each of them, who are the influencers or who are the leaders? So if you look to the next slide here, I've suggested some of those groups. They don't exist in every parish, and the list is not exhaustive. But you might have a Knights of Columbus Council. You might have an altar society. What about your parish pastoral council or your various commissions? Perhaps you have a seniors group. What about a moms group? Many parishes now have those. Do you have a young adults group? And then what about that casual group that's called the after Mass coffee and donuts group? I know it's a mixed group because there are children and teens there too, but perhaps there could be a way of doing something that they would want for a few minutes on one of those Sundays when they gather for coffee and donuts. And then finally, are there any ethnic or cultural groups in your parish? There should probably be a yes to that question in about 1/3 to 1/2 of our parishes across the country. And you might want to begin with your parish pastoral council. Theoretically, a parish pastoral council is supposed to do three things. It's supposed to pray together, it's supposed to learn together, and then it's supposed to do business together. And theoretically, those three components are supposed to take place at every parish council meeting. So there's a little bit of prayer and faith sharing, but can they be also experiencing their own ongoing adult faith formation, which corresponds to ways that they can become more effective in their role as members of the parish pastoral council? And then, of course, the third item of any of their meetings is their business, their agenda. So I have a question for the webinar participants here today, and it's this: what other groups or subsets of your parish population do you need to consider? And if you'd like to share those, something different than what's on this slide right now, just type them out and send them in. And while you're doing that, we're going to move to the second part of this webinar today, and that is, it's not just what they want, but how can we ask them how they prefer to receive it? So there are some questions that we can ask them. Do you like to listen to a presenter? Do you like to interact with a presenter? Do you enjoy small group discussion? As an individual, do you prefer to read a couple of pages of material pertinent to the topic before you attend the presentation? Do you like presentations which include the use of media? Do you want to be part of a virtual online learning group? And do you prefer to participate in adult faith formation alone in your own home? And how about some other methods or preferences that people might have for the way in which they receive adult faith formation? Now, Elizabeth or Victor, have there been any responses to the question about other groups or subsets that we might want to consider?
Victor, I can't see any. Do you
Yeah,
have any?
I see them. So Alice Noe says Bible study and RCIA. There's a lot. How many do you want me to read?
Well, just go now. I'm presuming a Bible study group is already participating in adult faith formation. RCIA is a form of adult faith formation, but continue with what you got there.
Lisa Helene says service groups, social outreach, ushers, collection counters, hospitality.
Those are good examples. What were the first two that you just mentioned again?
She has a big heading called service groups, social outreach, ushers, collection counters.
Let's go with those first two.
Okay.
Those are action-oriented groups. It would really be great to, at least once in a while, have them kind of debrief their experiences and their hopes and desires for doing what they do, because that will be a very inspirational form of adult faith formation. Also, bringing to those groups some of the pertinent social teachings of the church that correspond to the activities that they engage in. These people are already doing this. For instance, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, maybe Just Faith groups. Now, Just Faith is a form of adult faith formation already, but if they're engaged in activities, can we, for just a brief period of time, either before or after an activity, debrief what they experienced and how it touched them and how it inspired them? That's a good example of group. Anything else?
Oh yeah, there's lots. Sports organization, Christina Kreger brought that in.
Okay, keep on going because everybody can hear you and this is good.
Okay, and then she said Marcy Suzanne says we really need to consider reaching the people who are working parents.
Very good.
Mary Ann says religious education RCIA catechists.
Okay, the catechists are a group.
Okay. Cheryl Smith says maybe parents at a parent meeting.
Yes, definitely, and that's going to come up again in a few minutes.
Yolanda Del Rivero says charismatic group, why Catholic and small communities?
Well, frequently these small communities or why Catholic, that sort of thing, they are already engaged in adult faith formation because that's one of the purposes of their gatherings. But of course, you as the adult faith formation leader might be able to enrich that, either with new resources or with additional types of methodology. Go ahead, Victor.
Okay. Barbara Hall says parents of children in religious education classes, they usually go home with their kids while their kids are in class. And then separately, she says, same with parents of kids in parish and inter parish sports.
Okay, good. Correct. Keep on going.
Nelson Falcone says RCIA Bible study. And he also says St. Vincent de Paul. So does Karen Lewicki, says St. Vincent de Paul. Nelson again with religious education parents. We've got two more. Daniel says youth ministers. And I've got one more from Karen, Catholic school parents.
Very good. That last one, Catholic school parents, frequently overlooked, but you have access to them because the principal probably sends them an email every week. And so if you want to advertise something that perhaps they have decided that they want for themselves, because the parents in schools have an association called a parent group that does meet periodically through the year. And perhaps you could enhance one of those meetings with a 10 or 20-minute faith formation edition, which could go add to their ongoing adult faith formation. Okay, if we could continue then on to the next slide. Another question that we can ask people, of course, is what general type of adult faith formation programming draws your interest? You know, for instance, how about faith sharing groups? How about a group which discusses next Sunday's readings? Are you interested in being part of a book club? Bible study, probably it's one of the most popular forms of adult faith formation in our country. How about something that gives an overview of Catholicism? What about current moral and social issues? How about the church's social teaching? And then there are other types of adult faith formation programming, other types that you could add to your list. So my question to the webinar participants again is, what have you learned about various programming style preferences among the adults of your parish? You know, when I was talking about, do you like to listen to a presenter? Do you like to interact? Do you like the use of media? What have you learned about various programming style preferences among the adults of your parish? So feel free to respond to that on that little text box. And while you're doing that, I want to ask Marylin another question. I would ask Marylin if you could comment on your experience with adults and their various preferences and learning styles.
Sure, Pete. Before we even begin this, before I even get into that specifically, when you look at these groups, it's overwhelming. And I don't think anybody's expecting anybody to create something for each individual group. And that's where I was leading before when I said we also need something in common so that we don't become isolated from one another in our little groups. But then again, you know, people come to these particular events because this is what they may feel they need, or this is where they have their questions, and this is what what they may want to learn. And it seems to me that when we look at our groups, some of them are catechetical in foundation. In other words, they want to learn more about the faith tradition, whether it be scripture or Catholicism, and the other is a ministerial group, people who want to serve others. So, and sometimes people do both, and then that seems to be what we should be doing anyway. But we have to look at that. And again, I can't go back to this whole idea of spirituality and how that is really important for people to be growing no matter what they're doing. How are you going to do adult faith formation for the usher ministry? How are you going to help them learn more? How, and rather than, in what they're doing, it's important, but where is this taking them? Are they growing from this experience? My experience with adults is a couple of things. The first thing is to deal with adults with the presupposition that adults learn in a different way, obviously, than children do, and that they have different interests, and because of their experiences of life, that tends to be a great teaching tool. Their story is a great teaching tool that we need to tap into. The end of the day, I think so many people need to know, have their needs met, their spiritual needs met. So I think really we need to make it about them. The other things will come, but let's make it about them. Let's really make them feel like they're being listened to, that we are addressing their needs, their spiritual needs, whatever they may be. And the other thing we have to keep in mind that people also will be learning by doing. So in other words, people who belong to the St. Vincent de Paul Society, or those who are serving the poor, who work in soup kitchens, who, young adults who are working for Habitat for Humanity, no matter what it is, that learning experience is they're learning and they're growing in their faith, hopefully because of what they're doing. So it's not just the classroom model where they're getting in all the information. You're doing and you're putting it into action. And I think that needs to be really tapped into, because people wouldn't do this unless they wanted to do it. I would say that anytime we get together with adults also is that we need to make it about them. Again, going back to the whole idea of listening to their story. If we don't do that, I think we kind of lose people, and we tend to forget them sometimes, the adults. Young adults will tell you their parishes have forgotten them. Parents will say, well, it's all about the kids, and we have to be really careful of that. I feel so strongly about this that I've been asked to do a presentation for First Communion parents at a parish somewhere, and I have learned and I have decided that it's to make this meeting not about the kids. It's about the parents. And unless we give parents, as this one group, an example of a group, an opportunity to really think about, their journey, their faith journey, then they're not going to pass this on to their children. They're not going to talk to their children about their faith journey. They're just not going to do it because no one's helped them tap into it. They may not even be aware that it exists. So, it's important to talk to them about, in terms of First Communion, what was your First Communion day like? What was it for you? And what are your hopes for your children? This is more important than even, I think, talking about, what's important in terms of the day of, and you have to get all your things and what are the requirements. That's important, but I think we really need to pay attention. And when Pete mentioned before about, how do we listen, compassionately, and I think you set up the scene, you set up the environment of, learning and really being interested in them as people. And I know I talked about this the last session. This is really key, and it shows compassion. And it also helps them to want to grow and feel comfortable enough so that they're going to be looking at other things. And as they become more secure within themselves and in their own faith and what that means, then they can hand it on, that we hope they do. I mean, that's what we hope they do with their children. But this is relevant to every single group. And when you talk about the Knights of Columbus and you say to them, what is it that you do? What is your purpose? I need to know that. We need to know that. And where are you going with this? And how is this helping you grow? I think we can't be afraid to get into those personal questions. We can't be afraid not to get intimate. This is important. I think this is part of our role. And I think, especially in 2015, we need to offer something that no one else is offering. that sports groups are not offering, and that came up last time as also. How do we compete? What are they not offering? What can we offer that they don't offer? And one of the things is really listening to your story. It's not about the kids all the time. They're important, but they have their place, and they have that. But if we're going to do real good adult faith formation, we're going to have to really listen and offer what they need, and where are they, and who is God for them, and ask all those important questions. One other thing before I finish here, Pete mentioned before the pastoral councils and how they need to be, a group that is really, they're gelled together, and that's true for your staff as well. It's really important that as a staff, you need to be on the same page. You may not always agree, and that's fine, but you need to agree to disagree as long as you're having the conversation. But you also need to be praying together, and you also need to be working with like-mindedness, and so that everybody's on the same page is what is going to be happening with this adult faith formation. How are we going to do that? How are we going to bring people closer to God? That is the most important. And again, I think that is where people are hungry. They're so hungry today, some don't even realize or know how hungry they are. Again, through our compassion, and if we act as Christ, then they will be attracted to whatever it is they need, and how we offer that need and meet that need for them. So I thank you, Pete, for that question.
And I thank you for that response, because it's causing us to think creatively and with nuance. And again, we're not just dealing with 200 or 2,000 adults, we're dealing with individuals, each of whom are unique. And in some way, can we respond to them? Obviously, we can't do everything for everybody, but if we can be sensitive to the things that you mentioned, Marylin, I think we can be more effective. Now, Victor, have there been any responses to that question about what are various types of programming style preferences that individuals have that have been discovered by our webinar participants?
We have 20 questions. The first one, I think, from Janice was answered by Marylin just a minute ago. Her question was, how do we engage these populations? I think she was referring to the previous slide, but I think Marylin covered that with let's listen to them, let's make it about them. So I think we covered that question. The next one is from Christina. It says, as you mentioned, very important to offer a range of experiences. I'll keep going until you tell me to stop. The next one is from Marcy Suzanne. She says, Christian philosophy, just ordered a program, and then she has Christ 101 by Thomas Sullivan, PhD. I don't know if that's the program that's working for her. Next one is from Christine Rooney. She says, folks really have responded to our parish Facebook page and blog.
That's an interesting comment, because I don't have to go anywhere and I don't have to do anything to my schedule in order to respond to those two means of delivering things. I can do it in my pajamas at 2 o'clock in the morning. Go ahead.
I wouldn't recommend it, but you can.
The next one is from Jennifer. I believe the last name is Ladon. We have a pre-Lent event, an Advent event reflection, and carols, parishioners' reflections on the Advent Gospels, and special Advent music by our music minister and special guests.
It's interesting that those suggestions are catching the seasonal imagination of Catholics. You're supposed to do something for Lent. Give me an example of something I can do. The Christmas carols thing is unique because people like the carols, and to use them as a jumping off point for adult faith formation is really an interesting idea. Combines both singing, perhaps participation in singing, and then maybe some conversation about the meaning of those songs. Go ahead.
Lisa Helene says, every single adult learner is approaching our current study of Father Barron's Catholicism differently. Some do intense prep, some just watch the videos, some read before, some read the lessons after our discussion.
And I think sometimes that can be a bit frustrating for the adult faith formation leader, but again, all of them each of them is participating in their own mode, and as much as they wish. And I would rejoice in that, even though some of them are much more intense than others.
I agree with that, Pete, and I think that's a perfect example of how people learn, how adults learn. But it's also giving them the freedom to be adults, that they're doing what they feel they need, what they can, and hopefully the community will encourage, we encourage each other to maybe learn more or whatever it is that they need, that we can be a springboard at times for people to delve into areas that maybe are not so comfortable, to be challenged into going and invited into going into their out of their comfort zones. So some people just need their comfort zone right now, and that's okay. And hopefully they will grow. Maybe they won't, but God is going to have to take care of that. So we just do our best.
Each of those ways of participating in that program does result in growth, just varying amounts of growth.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, Victor, if you could keep on going. These are good questions.
Daniel, I think it's Grumet, says inclusion of activities and Q&A sessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Active learning.
Judy Egan just typed her name, Judy Egan, so I'm not sure if there was a question there. Suzanne Nelson says some come because they need certification.
Okay, so that's great. Good.
Kimberly Capricata says celebrations of special feasts in the Hispanic community are a good opportunity to bring English-speaking and Spanish-speaking groups together to experience faith growth together.
Excellent.
That's
excellent.
Right.
Great idea.
And as Pete mentioned before about learning about cultures, we have to honor the different ethnic groups in our, looking at who our parishes are made up of. I failed to mention that, again, that interest, that real true interest in who people are and their traditions and where they come from. And boy, can we learn from one another. And can we be enriched by different traditions? And I just think you'll have a richer parish if you do that.
Go ahead, Victor.
Kathy Schmidt, they want a pill to swallow that gives them instant knowledge about their faith rather than make time to overload their schedule to actually learn about their faith. Sigh.
That is true. However, and that's not true for everybody, but for many. However, if we can figure out different delivery systems where they don't have to necessarily come to us, but perhaps they can go to our parish website. Maybe they can be part of a virtual learning group where they never have to go, they don't have time to get outside their house, but that they can connect with a group and interact with it. It doesn't even have to be in live time. It can be, I don't know what the other kind of time is, dead time. I mean, you can just respond.
Asynchronous time, yes.
Okay. It's way beyond my pay grade. Asynchronous. Okay. Anyway, the point is, you can honor their concern. I don't have time. Give me the pill to swallow. And you can say, how about this? And maybe they'll dabble. If we can get them to dabble a little bit, maybe they'll be turned on to a little more of this adult faith formation that corresponds to their availability to get it. Anything else?
If I just might add something there, Pete, the whole idea of online virtual experience, it's great, believe me. That's how I teach. It's wonderful, and again, it's a way of treating adults like adults. Absolutely. However, it's very important for those of us who conduct these experiences or are creating these experiences, is that we also create a way of building community. Because you're not physically there, you also need to be clever and to be creative in how you're going to manifest this whole idea of community. And sense it. And as I said, I teach totally online, and I was really concerned about that when I began this, because I was afraid of losing out on community. But it can happen, and if you come through as true and authentic, and it really tests who you are as a teacher and who you are as a leader, because you're building this community without seeing people face to face, and that's a challenge, but it can be done. And I think we have to keep that in mind whether we're dealing with websites, whether we're dealing with blogs, whatever it is we're dealing, and the way we respectfully respond to people is important as well. Okay, go ahead, Victor.
Okay. Nelson Falcone says encouraging participation can be challenging, at least in urban settings like New York City. Finding schedules that work is critical, and engaging parish members with topics that are important for them. Surveying their needs seems to be important.
Also, we may have to consider, there may be something that turns out to be very popular, but we may have to offer it more than one time because not everybody's available at the one time. Just like you said, they have different kinds of schedules, different rhythms to their lives. So perhaps we have to do things more than once.
That's right.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Victor.
Okay. Chris Villalpando says Marylin's insight is critical because we could be reinforcing the walls that separate ministries. There is also the need to make groups grow outside of their ministerial silos.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Judy Egan says we have found open discussions and panel discussions work well. Participants like to share with one another, affirming to them that to find others feel or think the same way as they do. Might have misread that.
But that's a great observation.
Christina Kreger says, adding to Marylin's point, even when forming catechists, we must first make it about them, their faith journey as a starting point.
That's
Thank
critical.
you.
That's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
Critical dimension of catechist formation.
And
Yeah.
Nelson Falcone says, getting different groups together to share what they want to do can work. Maybe an AFF fair a few times a year.
Interesting idea.
I like that idea, and I'll tell you why. Because I know I've been in parishes where I worship. We have like a ministerial Sunday, but that again involves people to get involved. Whether it kind of still might segregate some people. But I like the idea of Adult Faith Formation Sunday or a day of exploring it. And you can also obviously bring ministries into that piece of it. But I like that idea. Maybe, I'm thinking this and I'm being enlightened as I'm speaking because I think that the idea of ministry just deals with people. It's like, oh my God, I got to get involved in something. And some people are just too tired. Some people just can't. And that's okay too. But the idea of adult faith formation, oh wow, I think that's a great idea. And just, have people come together and what is it we can offer you? Maybe that's the place of asking those questions. What do you need? I think maybe do it twice a year.
Let me make a comment here. You're piquing my memory banks here. I was told years ago of a parish that actually did something like this. They had an adult faith formation fair, and I think it was like learning centers. And so they might have had 4, 5, or 6 things going on, and they repeated them every half hour for maybe 3 times. So if I came to this thing, I could dabble in 3 different types of things. And if I was really interested in any one of them, there was information there for some ongoing stuff that could happen after the fair. But I could kind of go shopping in a sense for adult faith formation.
Yep.
And consequently, and people could choose. They didn't go to everything, but they chose what they wanted to sample. Maybe I'll sample a little bit of Bible study. Maybe I'll sample a little bit of the Church's social teaching. Whatever.
Great idea.
Something on parenting, obviously.
Catechist formation, whatever. You could throw it all in there. I mean, that would be, I think, and if somebody comes up with a model, send it to me. I want to look at it. I think it's a great idea. No, really, I think it's a phenomenal idea.
It's a take-off on these ministry fairs that Marylin was describing.
Yeah.
You could incorporate that, but it shouldn't be all about ministry.
No. In this case, it wasn't ministry. It was various types of adult faith formation.
I think it's
Victor,
a great idea.
anything else, or should we move on?
I've got 14 more questions.
I tell you what, hang on to them if you can. I don't know if that's possible.
Yes.
Because I think we need to get into the third part of this before we run out of time here. So if you could move to the next slide. And this is part 3, where we consider some short, simple survey techniques. Now, I think the word short should be elongated or made very large, but that's the whole point. If you ask people to answer 20 or 40 questions, they simply don't have time for that. So can we really boil this thing down to, to 10, to 8, to 6 questions that we want them to answer so that we can start getting some information from them that might guide the way we start producing programming for our adult parishioners. One way of doing this is to put in a short bulletin article. If you get the permission to put in a short pulpit announcement that would drive interested adults to an online survey on the parish website. Keep it short, because if they're going onto a website, they're only going to give you a few minutes anyway, because they're constantly moving from page to page on a website or various websites when they're actually online. But it's saying we have this survey, go to the parish website, answer the questions, and of course you, the adult faith formation leader, can begin retrieving them. So you're trying to get the people in the pews involved, one way or the other, either through the parish bulletin or pulpit announcement or both. And then if you move to the next slide, this is getting into some of the suggestions which were made by our webinar participants earlier. You can include such a short survey or maybe something a little more extensive when you're dealing with the parents of the students in your catechetical, faith formation, religious education programs. Also, you have an opportunity, because so many parishes do this now, of meeting with parents of students who are preparing for First Reconciliation or Eucharist or Confirmation. Many parishes meet with parents who are about to have a child baptized. And perhaps as part of that gathering, ask them before they leave to fill out that short survey about their own ongoing faith formation, what their interests are, what their needs are. Also, many of you folks have rather extensive group emails of your parishioners. Could you send that group a survey that's formulated in that thing called SurveyMonkey, so that when they respond, the mechanism automatically tally sheets everything that comes back to you. You hardly have to do any work. And again, you put together the questions. If I'm not mistaken, is SurveyMonkey limited to 10 questions? If it is, that's good, because then you're not trying to exhaust people's time. And then when you do registration for your faith formation programs, your religious education programs, don't forget your youth ministry programs. Include a parent survey among that material and see what they want. And probably the types of things that they might want has to do with parenting skills or the faith formation of my children. How do I enhance the religious atmosphere of my home? That sort of thing. And then if you move to the next slide where it says, have you simply tried to ask your parishioners, all of them? Now, it's not feasible. Well, I suppose it is feasible, but it may be out of your budget range to do a parish mailing to every parishioner. But what about doing a parish mailing to every 5th or every 10th? So if you have 2,000 registered households and you're doing it to every 10th, you're only sending it to 200. And you are getting a fairly accurate representation through such a sample. By the way, just because you send it out to 200, you're not going to get 200 responses back. So you're trying to send it out in such a way that it will generate enough response so that you have something concrete to look at. What about an ongoing survey? That's part of your parish registration packet. Every parish has turnover among its registrants every year, 5%, 10%, whatever's going on in your part of the country. So all those people who are coming to you new, can you ask them? And then there's something that's really wild, and most of you will never get permission to do this, but some of you will. What about a 5-point written survey at the end of weekend masses on a given weekend? It's right in the pew. People do it right there. And by the way, to get their attention, if you can say to them, this survey is also on the parish website, half of them are going to whip out their cell phones, get on the parish website, and answer the questions right then and there. But you can you can get a lot of information with some of these methods from a lot of people we normally don't hear from. But by asking them, and if they're present to us, we could possibly get some valuable information. And
right, and oh, I'm sorry, Pete.
Go ahead,
I also think this is a great way of. I think we often need assessment, and it's not just to get the initial information, but like a how are we doing kind of survey. I know I worked with a pastor once. There's no way he wanted any part of this. I think the truth was going to hurt. But I think it's important that we, part of what we do, we need to assess it and see, are we reaching people? Are they happy with things? Are they, how are we doing? And I think that's important as well to offer that opportunity.
Now, if we could go to our next question for discussion on the next slide there, and that's to our webinar participants. Have any of you used social media in seeking this kind of information about adults' interests and about their preferences in how they want to receive it? And if you have used social media, how well has it worked? So if some of you could respond to that while we go on and make a couple of last points here, and then see what response we get to that last question. I think we need to ask people this question because if they can answer it, it may give us an important point that we as adult faith formation leaders need to know. Ask them, what's one thing that prevents you from participating in parish adult faith formation opportunities? I'm presuming that the great majority of participants in this webinar today are parish catechetical leaders, diocesan catechetical leaders who are involved in adult faith formation. So what's keeping people from participating? You're already doing all kinds of things, but what's keeping your potential participants from actually taking part in what's going on? So ask that question too. I'm sure sometimes it's childcare, but it may be some unique things that you need to know about, especially in your particular parish. So another approach that you can use in getting information is the occasional use of focus groups. They tend to be small, 6 people. And what's interesting about this is that it's not a static tool. It's a dynamic tool because the people are right there. I know you have your particular questions that you want to ask them, but you can modify what's going on dependent on the responses that you begin to get from individuals in the group. And it may give you insight into various subgroups of parishioners. The focus group can be homogeneous, a subgroup, or you can make it a group representing various kinds of adults in your parish. And then finally, this is something that Marylin alluded to earlier. I don't know if everybody caught this, but how can we do ongoing needs assessment with the actual participants in our adult faith formation programs? How can this help us? Well, first of all, remember, when you think of all the adults in your parish, that's the cold group. When you think of the participants, the actual participants, current participants in your adult faith formation programs, they're the hot group. We also need to ask the hot group, what do they want next? And so at the end of a program or at the end of a session, do a quick take on what's going on. Maybe even it can be verbal, it could be something on paper, whatever the case may be. So Victor, any responses to that third question about the use of social media and finding out about these sorts of things?
Yeah, I think we have 3 responses to that. We have 20 overall questions, some left over from the last time.
Well, let's start with the social media responses first.
Okay, so Barbara Hall says, we have Facebook page for our religious ed program, but it seems to be used mostly by the parents of children in sacramental programs. We have over 200 families in our program, and about 65 only are on our Facebook page. How do we reach these adults for faith formation if we can't keep in touch with them? I guess that's what the question's asking.
Well, the technology is not the only way to stay in touch with them, although it certainly makes the program leader's job a whole lot easier if you can use technology. My guess is that you can at least get an email address from these people. It's the rare individual today who does not have email. You know, I do RCIA ministry, and among the catechumens and candidates, maybe there's one person every other year who does not have email. So I would say go after them through email if they're not going to connect with you on Facebook, and see if you can reach them that way. Go ahead, Victor.
Alice Noe says that she uses Facebook, Twitter, and blogging, and a website for her ministry, which is an adult-oriented but not parish-based oriented. In other words, it's not a parish ministry necessarily.
Do you notice what she just said? I heard her say 4 different things. If I'm not interested in being on Facebook, I can still be connected to her through whatever, right? So again, social media is quite varied. So not everybody is interested in being connected to each type of social media, but if you use a multiple number of social outlets, perhaps you can widen the net of people that you can have contact with. Go ahead, Victor.
Kathy Schmidt says, Information for Growth is an adult faith formation assessment questionnaire that helps adults learn what topics they know well and what topics in which they are weak. You can get an aggregate report of your parish that tells you in general the topics that are strong and weak so that we can plan for future adult sessions. $6 a person from the National Catholic Education Association, available online or paper and pencil formats.
I am familiar with that. It comes, like it says, from the NCEA. And the interesting thing here is that it gets tally sheeted for you. And it does give you some trends. Now, when you saw the price tag, $6 per participant, you said, well, that might be sticker shock. This is when you start doing, every 10th or every 20th of a group in order to get a representative picture. You can also do it with as many as you want, but it will give you a very solid picture of their of their strengths and weaknesses. However, what's tricky here is, even though I'm weak in something, I may not be interested in learning about it. So there's a difference between what I want and what I need. Go on, Victor.
Okay, and I'm just letting you know we've got 5 more minutes left on the webinar. But Pat says, I have found out that they are now on Twitter and Instagram.
Okay.
Chris Villalpando says, I like Pete's distinction between the cold group and the hot group. A lot of discernment needs to happen as to how much energy are focused on each of these groups.
That's correct. I can put 90% of my energy, or maybe 100% of my energy, on my hot groups. But if my ministry is to all the adults of the parish, at some point I need to step back and assess my ministry and say, maybe I should spend a little time once in a while on the cold group and see if I can get some of them to join the hot group. But if we never go after the cold group, we're only going to have tiny little groups of people who are the only ones who always show up to what we offer. But we're trying to expand participation.
Pete, I might even add, I tend to think there's also a warm group. I don't want to throw anything into this, but I think there's also a group of people who we might consider warm, who, are kind of interested, or they don't show up all the time, but they do sometimes. I think there's such a variety of people that I think, again, what I'm saying here is that I agree with you in that we need to pay attention to everybody. It's like, being a parent. When you see the one kid, hurting the most, or the one who needs your attention at that time, it's the same idea. And I think we have to be very aware of that as well.
That's a good point. It's a good point, Marylin. If people are participating, we're happy. They don't participate all the time. Nobody can, or nobody has that interest.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
so we still have to love them.
Coming close to the end of this, and so our last slide here is a question. And that is to each webinar participant here today, what's going to be your next step? I would just encourage you to try something. Maybe it's something that you've already done, well then do it again. maybe add something else, another road towards reaching out to more of your parishioners to see what they want and to see what way they want to receive it. So consider something, try something, and see what results will come to you. And finally, for our next webinar, we're going to be talking about actual adult faith formation surveys. So we have a couple that we want to put up on the screen, but we're interested in what you have already tried. So if you could send us no later than this Sunday any adult faith formation surveys you have used. They could be short, they could be more substantive, so that we might use parts of them in the third presentation on February 9th. And you've got the email there where you can send them so that we can collect them. And so I would invite you to do that. So are there any final announcements, Victor or Elizabeth?
No, I think just we need to invite them to the next one, and I apologize about dropping that on the page. Sorry about that. So the next one is on February 9th, as Pete said, with practical applications. It's at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Central Time, and you can figure out the rest of the country or time zones. So can you see it okay?
Yeah, we can.
And the other ones are recorded. You can go, well, this one will be on, I don't know how soon you'll have it, Victor, but it will be there for you to go and listen to or share with somebody else so that you can get the information to other people.
Yeah, and we will have this recording in the next few days. The previous session, this session, and the next upcoming one will all be posted to the NCCL website and to the Sadlier YouTube channel in case you are looking for to share this, as Elizabeth said, with the people there at your parish or at your site, wherever you're working. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Pete, Marylin, and Elizabeth for their hard work in putting this together, this very informative webinar. And again, if you're looking for credit for this workshop, it's probably best to take a small little summary to your supervisor and note the date and time of this session. On behalf of Sadlier, we'd like to thank NCCL, and we'd like to wish everybody a good day. Thank you very much.